Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Rome collapsed during the crisis of the 3rd century. The 3rd century was not kind to Rome. It almost seems like a miracle that Rome actually managed to pull off some more decades and centuries even. The 3rd century brought many disasters to the empire. Rome was nearly bankrupt, Rome had internal problems, Rome had barbarian invasions, Rome also suffered from the plague, and there was a near total collapse of the bureaucracy. At one point, Rome was even split into 3 different empires. The so-called Gallic Empire that controlled Gaul and Britain, briefly also Iberia. Rome proper, which had Italy, Greece, North Africa and the Balkans. And the Palmyrene Empire that controlled Egypt, Syria and parts of Turkey. Many emperors ruled during this time, and most ruled for few years, even just a few months, and some even managed to rule for more than 5 years, which is basically nothing. All of this was of course a recipe for a disaster. And it only changed gradually after Claudius Gothicus won the Battle of Naissus in 268 and 269 against the Goths, and later on Aurelian, who ruled for 5 years, but he took out the Palmyrene Empire and even the Gallic Empire, Iberia already being taken back by Claudius Gothicus. Diocletian is nowadays considered as the emperor who managed to put an end to this crisis, although it is not only his work and not only his success that Rome managed to survive this century, but in history he's considered as the one who managed to finally make a total break from the crisis of the 3rd century. What if all of that changed? What if Rome actually collapsed during the crisis of the 3rd century? This alternate history will have an interesting twist at the end. First of all, let's say that Claudius Gothicus and Aurelian, they would have been killed by the Goths, and they would stay some more years in Greece and Asia Minor, the Goths of course. Both of them, they were actually fighting in the same battle, which I briefly mentioned before in the introduction, and so it is a very high chance and a very high possibility that both would suddenly just be killed. This would leave us with an earlier rule of Quintilius and of Tacitus, or Tacitus. Both emperors managed to repel a few barbarian invasions, including the Alemanni, who would come dangerously close to Rome proper. So with that said, the Goths in Greece and Asia Minor could be beaten, as well as the Alemanni in Italy, but more resources would be needed in doing so, and also with more emperors suddenly being that, you will also have more internal problems, which again means that more resources will be needed. At the same time, the Gallic and the Palmyrene Empire would consolidate a little bit. With that said, one of the emperors of Rest Rome would try taking back Iberia from the Gallic Empire or all of Palmyrene, but they would fail, and vice versa, the Gallic Empire as well as the Palmyrene Empire would fail to take Rome. Instead, barbarian invasions would occupy the Gallic Empire, while the Palmyrene Empire would have very high chances to even consolidate further and to take even all of Asia Minor and parts of northern Africa, which would weaken the authority of the already damaged emperor who resides in Rome. The Gallic Empire would at one point probably lose control in the areas of today's Netherlands to the Franks, while parts of Bulgaria would easily pass to the Visigoths after being beaten from Greece. Dacia might also be lost to the Goths, or to some other tribes. In some more years, the Palmyrene Empire would be able to beat the Sassanid Empire, although not as close and also not as decisively as the Roman Empire itself, but they would still be able to take huge possibilities from the internal problems that the Sassanid Empire had in that time. The other part is that Armenia, for instance, might become a dependency of the Palmyrene Empire, and Arab allies might actually be very important later on for the Palmyrene Empire. The Gallic Empire and West Rome would fight sporadically, and only after decades they would be able to have an unspoken truce. Germania Superior would be taken by the Alemanni, while territories of Rome north of the Alps and also in Pannonia and some parts of the Balkans, they would be permanently lost. The next step that might happen would be that the Palmyrene Empire would take most, if not all, of northern Africa, and there would be several attempts to cross the Bosporus or the Strait to go to Sicily and then Italy. However, with the Sassanids recovering these attempts, they would be very temporarily, and the Palmyrene Empire would again mostly focus towards their eastern fronts. The Emperor of Palmyrene could promise the gods certain rights or lands with the gods which the gods then would use as some type of legitimacy to get more out of the Balkans. I mean, if an emperor, even if it's not the emperor, promises you something, you will just use it as a perfect pretext to just cause havoc. Endless Roman Gothic wars would be the consequence, and together with some Palmyrene support, this would give the Romans, or West Rome, many problems. While the Gallic Empire would split as in OTL, with Iberia becoming again loyal to Rome and Britannia probably going their own way. The Gallic Empire would now face problems in all of their fronts. During the next decades and centuries, the fragmented Roman Empire would deal a little bit better with the invasions. Yes, the Huns, they would still sweep in and destroy a lot, but having no centralized kingdom, the Huns would just be a temporary problem. Independent Britannia and West Rome would stay alive because West Rome would have Iberia and Italy, where they could use the natural defenses in a very efficient way, and also having nothing to do with Britannia does mean that Rome itself will not waste a lot of resources in there for the defense, and Britannia, well, itself is a very protected area for some time only. In the Balkans, the barbarians would fight against Roman warlords, other barbarians, and the Greco-Gothic kingdom. While in Gaul, a Soissons-like state, a rump state of the Gallic Empire or Roman rump state, whatever you would like to call it, the Franks, the Alemanni, Saxons, and many other tribes that would start to immigrate in there, they would divide this area among themselves. And with an independent Britannia, no Celtic migration will happen in Brittany or in northern Spain, which means that Brittany would probably be much more Roman and become more Latin. The Palmyrene Empire would not replace the Byzantine Empire in this timeline, and at one point they too would take a huge toll. The Sassanids could convince Rome and the Goths to join them. They could potentially take everything up until Egypt, whereas Rome from Iberia and Sicily, they could retake northern Africa with the very important province Africa, or where we have Carthage. And the Palmyrene Empire would thus lose even the home city, and this would basically mean their end, because they would then just face a civil war, and this would be the time for Armenia to shine, where they would take the opportunity to expand while the Sassanids, they would be very satisfied with their gains, and they would also try to digest their conquest because they would be very overextended and face also rebellions in Egypt and Syria. We would now be in an alternate 6th century. Now you're asking yourself, what about Christianity? Christianity was really important. Yes, but Christianity would not really be that unified as in OTL. Due to the fragmented Roman Empire, some parts would never even receive a Christian influence. I'm speaking mostly about Britannia or parts in Gaul or even Brittany, for instance. And without Constantine and other emperors, questions about heresy and other important subjects would not really be treated in a unified way, leaving Christianity really open for many interpretations. Without Aurelian and the Sol Invictus cult, Christmas would not even exist, or maybe in a very different way. Thus, Arianism, Nestorianism, Bogomilism, and many other interpretations of Christianity could exist, or Christianity would not even be that strong and just be religion of a minority. The only parts where I could see a strong Christianity or strong Christian presence would most likely be the Middle East and mostly Anatolia and Armenia, because Armenia was one of the first, if not the first kingdom to actually convert to Christianity. And they would compete with the Sassanid controlled parts where we would have Zoroastrianism and then of course the native religions. Feudalism would not exist in this timeline and never really come to practice. If Islam arises, it would of course be a very different Islam than in our timeline, given the fact that Christianity would already be very different. But with the Sassanids having more resources to their disposition, without Byzantium and a strong rival in that area, Islam would not just come and knock out everyone, but troubles with Arabs would still persist, and Arab invasions would definitely occur, similar as Germanic invasions, and pose a problem for at least a few decades or even a century, with no clear results, and this would leave the Middle East in a status quo where not much would change, but yeah, it would just stay like this for some time. The only power that could take advantage of it would be Armenia and West Rome. West Rome might even get Egypt back at some point, and at the same time, and in a last-ditch effort, the last remaining Roman state in Gaul, or the last Roman or Latin controlled part within today's France, could ask Rome for help, finally agreeing to be ruled from Rome, and in the series of draining wars with a very ambitious emperor, most of Gaul could be taken back, except for some, let's say, tiny Frankish kingdoms or Alemannic kingdoms or even Saxon kingdoms. The Slavs would still exist as in OTL, while Armenia and the Greco-Gothic kingdom would have wars, which would give the Sassanids the chance to expand in Armenia and Asia Minor and in this alternate 8th century. Egypt too would be taken, and we would have a specific balance of power for some time where neither Rome nor the Sassanids would really have an edge against the other. The Greco-Gothic kingdom would probably choose the Sassanids as an ally, while Rome could use the Slavs to their advantage against the Greco-Gothic kingdom. Instead of Italy, Iberia and Northern Africa, the Balkans, Greece and Anatolia would be heavily destroyed and less developed, which means that Italy in this timeline would have still very good and big cities. Iberia, of course, already in our timeline with the Visigoths was expanding their cities and had very good scientific people in there, or well, you cannot call them really scientific, but people who collected knowledge like Isidore of Sevilla. And Also with Northern Africa, where we would not really see the Vandals coming and other barbarians, they too would still be a very important province, whereas the Balkans, Greece and Anatolia, with all the wars in this timeline, they would lose a lot of influence. And I think that Iberia might become even the heartland of this alternate Rome, and with the Viking invasions even more so. Because taking back all of Gaul would still mean that a lot of the parts that were within Gaul would be destroyed, and then with the Vikings coming, people living in the coast or close to the rivers would then escape to other parts, while people probably closer to Iberia would have higher chances to somehow beat the Vikings. Once the Mongols arrived, the Sassanids, they would be out. Rome would yet again go for Egypt and slowly absorb the Balkans, parts of Greece and even the Middle East, while not truly getting all of the Greco-Gothic kingdom due to their good geographical situation after they would have expanded into Anatolia. The Arabs could become good Roman allies against threats from the east. Islam and Christianity would never really become a dominant religion except in some geographical areas. Rome would definitely change, yes, but stay somewhat consistent in many parts of the Mediterranean, while Britannia could, in order to defend itself from further invasions, take Ireland, the Pictish kingdom, and even the Faroe Islands and Iceland. Germany might become united at one point by the Franks or the Saxons or the Alemanni, while Eastern Europe would be pretty much Slavic, not Christian at all, and have an alternate Poland or an alternate Russia compete for power, or even have a surviving and a more stable post-Mongol state. While the Greco-Gothic kingdom would dominate much of Greece, Armenia after the Sassanid and Mongol invasion would also be totally gone. Africa and Mali especially would never get the Islamic influence, and Christian influence would be out of question, while Ethiopia would be a wild card in here. Technology might slightly be advanced due to the fact that there would be more competition earlier on, and that the Mediterranean was not just radically cut as in OTL. The same would apply for trade. We would have periods of more trade in times of peace and then less trade in times of war. But there would never be this total cut as we knew it from our timeline. The Americas would be discovered and a fierce competition between Britannia and the Scandinavian powers would arise, while Rome would probably colonize parts of Brazil, but it's still out of question whether they would do so or whether they would actually rather go for parts of Africa. A conflict between Rome and Britannia could happen, a new Persian power would arise, and a strong Poland or a strong Russia or the strong post-Mongol state, depending on who would win against each other, they would compete probably against the Scandinavian powers and Rome.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.